There's one rule in NASCAR that felt very appropriate to talk about on this channel, so let's get to it. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome to Runnin' Retro on the ATYL Media channel, where we do motorsports media your way. And on this show, we're talking about the greatest moments in motorsports history, the moments that shaped the series that we know and love. On this episode of Runnin' Retro, there was one NASCAR rule that I felt was very appropriate to cover on this channel to kick off the 2025 season, and that is the double yellow line rule. This rule has caused so many controversial moments at tracks like Talladega and Daytona, and because we are the Above the Yellow Line media channel, I figured we should relive all these controversial calls together. So without further ado, let's talk about how the double yellow line rule changed the sport. The infamous rule came into play in 2001 following the loss of Dale Earnhardt Sr. at the Daytona 500. Following so many tragic deaths in this time in the sport, it was important that NASCAR look at all of their rules and implement stronger safety measures. Of course, we have the Hans device that came late in 2001 and the safer barriers that came in 2002, but outside of the technology and tools that NASCAR had implemented, they also had to look within the rules of racing themselves in the action on the track. Thus, we have the yellow line rule that was implemented at superspeedway type of tracks. Per the NASCAR rulebook today, this rule is defined as, quote, vehicles must race above the double yellow lines around the entire racetrack. If in NASCAR's judgment, the vehicles go beneath the double yellow lines to improve its position, vehicles will be black flagged. If in NASCAR's judgment a vehicle forces another vehicle beneath the double yellow lines in an effort to stop the advancement/pass, the vehicle may be black flagged. Also in the rulebook, NASCAR defines what beneath the yellow line even means, and this is equally as important to keep in mind during this video. NASCAR defines beneath the double yellow lines as follows: when the vehicle's left side tires are beneath the left line of the inside double yellow lines that separates the apron from the racing surface while passing another vehicle. And before this rule was implemented, drivers won races by going below that yellow line. Take Jeff Gordon winning the 1997 Daytona 500, for instance. But because NASCAR had to reconsider the safety of their drivers and these unfair advantages, these rules and wins like this would be taken away. With that background in mind, let's take a look at controversial moments where this rule was put to the test. The first race that comes to mind is the Aaron's 499 at Talladega in 2003. What's crazy about this race was the big one happened on lap 4 involving 27 cars. One of the drivers in that wreck with minimal damage was Dale Jr., who had to start in the back of the pack due to an engine change after qualifying. During the course of this race, Jr. was able to make a really good comeback after having to pit 17 times to fix the damage on his car and went on to win the race. However, the moment in question comes down to how he was able to get that lead and win his 4th consecutive Talladega event. With 5 to go, it was Kenseth Jr. and Jimmie Johnson fighting for the win with a swarm of vehicles behind them. Kenseth made a move to the outside to block a run coming from Jimmie Johnson, which gave Dale Earnhardt Jr. clearance to take the lead on the bottom. However, Matt Kenseth moved to block the run by Jr., and it was then that we saw the number 8 dip the left side tires well below that yellow line entering the turn 3 apron. And this was the move that got Dale Jr. that first position and ultimately the win. You see those tires dip below that yellow line, it blatantly seems like it would warrant a penalty, but NASCAR deemed that Earnhardt's pass on Kenseth was legal. That number 8 was forced below the yellow line when Kenseth went to make that block. For more detail, NASCAR officials explained Dale Earnhardt Jr. was in the act of passing Kenseth when he was forced below that yellow line, and Jim Hunter, a NASCAR spokesperson at the time, said he was already past Kenseth before he crossed the yellow line, making the pass legal. But if you look at the clip again, you could argue Jr. went below that yellow line before he was past Kenseth all the way, and that he went below that line to advance his position. So this has to be one of the first moments where the rule came into question since its inception. It's the first time that NASCAR really had to make a discretionary call. And to this day, many believe that NASCAR should have called Jr. out on this rule and black flagged him, but as DW said on the broadcast,
it would be very unpopular to black flag him.
Let's jump ahead to 2006 during the Budweiser Shootout. Let's say you're coming off a turn 4 at Daytona, and in front of you and to the outside of you are 2 cars that are taking a hard left turn to pit road, but you're not pitting with them. So you have 2 options now that you have nowhere to go. You either run those cars over and wreck everybody, or you duck below that yellow line to avoid a crash. This is the exact situation that Carl Edwards found himself in with Jimmie Johnson and Kyle Busch going to pit road. And Carl Edwards took the first option. He did what I think I would have done and what anyone else would have done to avoid a wreck. He went below that yellow line. And in doing this, he did not gain any positions, rather he actually lost a few. Regardless, NASCAR black flagged Carl Edwards for going below that yellow line, and this confused so many people.
I'm sure what NASCAR is going to say that he passed the cars, the 5 and 48 that were making a pit stop. He passed those under the yellow line.
But what else was he going to do in that situation?
Pass above the yellow line because they're slowing down to pit road speed.
He's either going to run him over or he's going to do what he did. What he did, he avoided a crash. I don't know any other thing he could have done in that situation.
When NASCAR called for Carl Edwards to go to pit road to serve that penalty, rightfully so, Carl was very frustrated.
There's no way in hell I'm not pulling in. I don't know how we get penalized for checking up and everybody passes us. We lost spots and we're getting penalized? Not penalized because we're not pulling in. Are we going to lose the lap? I'm not coming. It's wrong.
He did eventually go to serve that penalty, but unfortunately, when serving that, he ended up speeding on pit road and had another penalty. Clearly, it was not the 99's day. Looking back at all these decisions, this is one that I heavily disagree with if you want my opinion, but we just saw an example where there should have been a penalty, but there wasn't with the Aaron's 499, and now we have an event where there was a penalty where I really do think that we shouldn't have had one. So this begs the question. If a driver's only option to avoid a wreck is to go below that yellow line, does that mean there should be a penalty or not? And again, that's up to NASCAR. Next up, we go back to Talladega, this time for the 2008 Amp Energy 500. It follows the same dilemma as Carl Edwards, where you're doing the right thing, but there's a consequence to that. Let me set the stage for this one. The chase was in full swing and the title was between Jimmie Johnson and Carl Edwards, but other drivers had something to prove in this race too. Enter Tony Stewart, who wanted to win in his final season with Joe Gibbs Racing and was the only one on his team racing full-time without a win that year. And then we have Regan Smith, who was a rookie and was racing in the 01 for DEI. A win for Regan would be big because his career was up in the air at this point. And DEI was about to sell to Chip Ganassi Racing, so a win for Regan could hopefully inch him closer to job security in 2009. So let's fast forward to the final restart of the race with Tony Stewart leading and Regan Smith behind. On that restart, Smith goes high to try and make a pass on Stewart, but Stewart goes to block. Then Smith goes low and gets his nose to the quarter panel of the number 20, and yet again, Stewart goes to block, forcing Smith down on the track. With that, the 01's left side tires go below that yellow line. But what were the options here? Sit on the yellow line and hook the guy in the lead, or take the yellow line and hope being forced below is the call, because again, you can't slow down. It's either you go forward or you go below that yellow line. And slowing down on those high banks is not a good option. As quickly as he could, Regan Smith got back up on the track and pulled side by side with Tony Stewart, racing to the line, and that 01 pulled out ahead and got the win. Or so we thought. NASCAR black flagged Regan Smith for going below the yellow line despite being forced down there. The thought process here was if Regan got back up on the track just a little quicker, maybe the story would have been different. But in NASCAR's eyes, though he was forced below that yellow line, he stayed down there, and in doing so, that helped him get that win. But then yet again, what else was Regan supposed to do?
He would have to wait 3 more years before claiming a victory in NASCAR's highest series.
Following along those same lines, we have an example of what happens when you break the yellow line rule, but what happens when you follow it and it goes wrong? Let's take it back to Daytona for the Daytona 500. It's 2009 and NASCAR introduces the double yellow line. We have a restart with 77 laps to go, and 2 laps later, the lapped cars of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Brian Vickers are fighting for position and the free pass. Jr. got a run and goes to the inside of Brian Vickers, but Vickers throws a block, forcing Jr. below that yellow line. Now, as reiterated by the broadcast booth that day, the rule is if you're forced below that line, you must come back up onto the track and blend in. And that seems to be what Jr. tried to do, but as we know, it went horribly wrong and caused a big wreck. NASCAR's call on this was no penalty. They felt that Dale Jr. was forced below that yellow line and that he did what he needed to do to get back up on the track in time. But at what cost? That's the question I ask you. What was the cost of this? There were several things going on here. First off, the question of with 75 laps to go, should 2 drivers be racing that hard for a free pass position? But the other thing that was in play here was that yellow line rule and the worry of breaking it and what that would cost these drivers. And when Junior went back up onto the track so fast, or tried to, In fear of breaking that yellow line rule, it messed up a lot of drivers' days, including the dominant car of Kyle Busch, who was absolutely junked after this wreck. That same year, we see another instance of a driver doing exactly what the rulebook states, but things going horribly wrong between Brad Keselowski and Carl Edwards. On that final lap, Brad was pushing Carl Edwards on the high side, gaining momentum on Junior and Newman, and they got to the lead. Heading into turn 4, Keselowski tried to go high to pass Edwards, but Edwards blocks that. Then Brad goes low, and Edwards throws a block, forcing Keselowski to that yellow line. However, Keselowski refuses to go below that yellow line, maintains his position while Edwards is still throwing the block, and his move hooks Edwards' car, it goes airborne, hits the 39, and goes into the catch fence. Again, this is a prime example of a driver following that double yellow line rule and a potential consequence of doing so, because if you go below that yellow line, NASCAR gets to make the call, were you forced or were you not? And to go with the sure thing, you do everything you can to stay above it. Well, Brad stayed above it, and you saw what happened. And in this race, the idea really came about. We're racing within the confines of the rules. This is the box that NASCAR put us in. Other key moments that are more recent that I think of are when Spencer Boyd won his first Truck Series race in 2019. In this case, Johnny Sauter's win was taken away as NASCAR ruled that he forced another truck of Riley Herbst below the yellow line as he tried to defend the lead coming to the line. Because of this, Sauter was counted as the last car on the lead lap, and Spencer Boyd, who got to second place, coming to the line, was deemed the winner. You also look at a moment with Matt DiBenedetto in the Yellowwood 500 when he forced William Byron below that yellow line, and Hamlin, to avoid all of this, went below that yellow line himself. They all went 3 wide, and Denny Hamlin got the win, and no penalty was assessed to Hamlin. This was also a major moment as Matt DiBenedetto was fighting for his career, but again, this yellow line comes into play, and this race had several other yellow line violations too. There are so many moments since the inception of this rule that I could mention here, but I'll leave it there. And clearly this rule had such an impact on me that I literally named this show after it. A most recent update to this rule was made in 2023 when NASCAR implemented it in practice and qualifying, making things consistent across the entire race weekend. But as we know, this is a rule that remains controversial to drivers and fans alike. What are your thoughts on this rule, and are there any moments I did not mention that came to mind? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to go to AboveTheYellowLine.com for more content. We appreciate you giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Thank you all so much for your support, and until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.